Welcome. Let's look at a very simple way of getting your character moving around on the screen in the Godot game engine. Later on, you'll want to use more complicated techniques, but this is just a getting started video. So as you can see over here, I have my character, beautiful alien here on the screen that I want to control. And using the arrow keys, if I press left, the alien goes off to the left. If I press right, it goes off to the right. If I press up, down, I can hold two directions at a time to go at a diagonal. And also something I think is important is if I hold both left and right, no change occurs. And if I hold up and down, no change occurs. I think that's a nice simple control scheme. So let's look at how we did that. So the first thing, here's the code. The first thing is that I added a script to my player. Now I'm just going to get rid of that script and show you how I added the script. So I clicked on player over here. My player is an Area 2D node just for simplicity's sake. Later on in future projects, we'll probably use a kinematic body 2D, but let's stay simple for the moment. And the player has a sprite that you can see here. It's all been locked together nicely using this icon here, so I can move it around its starting position around without the two elements diverging and going separate ways. Now, if I click on the player, I click add script here, and as you can see, it will give me some suggestions here. I suggest actually we go with an empty script, but you don't have to. And then when I click create, we're going to write our code here. Now, I'm just going to paste it there because I've already, already have that. I've already written it. I don't want to be typing out on the video, but let's have a little look at this. Let's see if I can get it any bigger. Okay, get rid of that. So let's have a look at what's happening here. So basically, this extends Area 2D always needs to be there, otherwise it won't work. It basically means all the code that's associated with the Area 2D node needs to be brought into here. So we need to have that, we need to leave that there. And then I've simply made a new variable called speed, and I've set it to 200. Now this is, I'll put a comment here, this is pixels per second. So every second, if we think about it, this screen I think here is about 1,000 pixels wide and about 600 high. And you can check that by going into project settings and going down to window. So 1024 by 600. So that means about 200 pixels per second movement. Now me writing that comment doesn't make the computer understand that. That's just for me to remember, and I'm going to program it here. Now, the function, if I put a function called _process inside the code here, the game engine will take that and it will run it every frame. Now, usually that's 60 frames a second, but it may change depending on performance and things like that. And so because it changes based on performance, it'll actually give us this variable called delta, and the delta is just the amount of time in seconds since the last frame. So usually that'll be 1/60th of a second, so 0.016, I think. Is that right? Well, we can print it actually to be sure. If we go down here, we can say print delta every frame. And now, yeah, so you can actually see there that at the start, it was a little bit all over the place, and then it settled into a nice 60 frames a second. So that number there is how much time has passed since the last frame. So we're going to basically run 4 checks. If input.isAction just pressed UI right, now that is usually mapped to the right arrow key. Then if it's actually we don't want just pressed. If we do just pressed, it'll only be active if it's the next frame after being pressed. So what we want, I'll just check this is working. Yep, is we want it to say is action pressed. That means is the button being held down. So is that button being held down? UI right, which is the right arrow key. Then we want to take position.x on the screen, and we want it plus equal, so we're adding to it, changing it, by the speed times delta. Now the reason we times it by the delta is the speed is the amount of time we want it, the amount we want it to change in a second, and then the delta is the amount of seconds that have passed since the last frame, and if we times them together we get the perfect amount of pixels to move in that time period. So no matter what the frame rate is, it'll keep moving at the same speed. That's really important. The same thing, it makes perfect sense then, UI left, we're going to subtract that from our X position. Now, the one thing that might be a bit confusing here is that if the UI down is pressed, we're actually going to increase the Y position. And if up is pressed, we're going to decrease the Y position. So in Godot and in a lot of programming environments, the X value is 0 on the top left here and goes through to whatever it is, so 1024 over here. But the Y value actually starts at 0 here as well and then goes down to 600 in this case. So the further down, the higher the Y number. So that's a little bit different to in maths or Scratch if you've used things like that before. So anyway, this function will run 60 times a second, roughly, and it'll run all of these 4 checks every time. And it can do multiple ones of these. So if X is pressed, if UI right is pressed and UI down is pressed, then it will change both of these things and it will move diagonally. And if right and left are pressed, it'll do both of those things and end up where it started. So you won't even see that because it's not drawn until the end of the function each time. Just a quick thing, if you wanted to use WASD, etc., you don't have to, but if you go into Project Settings and go into Input Map, and you scroll down to UI left, for example, you can click Add there, and you can add a key, and you could add the A key and press OK. And you could do that for the other W, S, and D, but I will just show you the A key. Yep, so the A key is moving the character left in that case. So, like I said, a simple way, but it's getting us started. Hope it helps.